All right. Now I am in opinion. Awesome. So this week we have a really special guest I'm really excited about. I think we maybe have chatted once or two before in the distant past, but not recently. Frederick is a movie producer, has produced over 20 films, produced probably one of my very favorite films of all time, Hoop Dreams. Has recently written 3 books, is very involved in men and what's going on with men and also boys, which are the topics of this meeting. And I think we'll have a lot to say. I actually watched a bunch of videos of yours, Frederick, and one of them I really liked. You introduced it by saying that your mission in life is service and art, which I thought was really cool. So maybe this will be your service work for the day. I don't know, or art, I don't know, but
well,
really
and
like
there's a third component that I added after my late wife died just 7 years ago, and that's love.
Oh,
So,
for sure.
so I
Oh, for
don't
sure.
have kids. I don't have much in the way of property or owning stuff, but my life is about art, service, and love.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
Oh, that is awesome.
So I'm just gonna mute you guys just so we can get a good recording. So why don't we start with your 5 principles of mature masculinity and just kind of tell us what they are and just kind of give us a little overview of that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, to me, it's important that we understand as men that, in a sense, what I think most of us strive for is living for men, living to be men of honor, men who are respected in the community, but maybe most importantly, we respect ourselves, that we really can feel good about ourselves. And so for me, it's important that these principles be understood so that, it's not rocket science, that, we can really aspire toward this and achieve it. So the first principle, and none of this, I don't think, is going to be, particularly astonishing, my guess is to you guys, but nonetheless, it's important stuff. So accountability for me is first and foremost, that, the agreements that we make with others and ourselves, we have to follow through on that, that our words, we walk our talk, right? That it's not just, wind flapping past our ears when we say we're going to do something, we do it. That's really important to me. And being a man of integrity, somebody that people can trust, that if Frederick says he's going to do it, it's as good as done. So, and then of course there's nuances to that, right? Nobody is 100% going to follow through on every agreement they make. Fine. What we have to understand is then we circle back to the people we made agreements with and renegotiate them. And just say, I don't have the time now, or I got sick or whatever, and just make a new agreement. So that's really important. And frankly, I feel like it's a fundament for the way the world operates, because if we don't have agreements that we're all making and keeping, you get the world as we have it now, pretty much chaotic and falling apart, and where nobody trusts anybody else. So I feel like that's arguably the most important principle. So a second one is emotional maturity, emotional awareness. We're taught as men that, we've got to hide, repress, and deny our feelings, right? And we all know that this is toxic. This is pernicious. We have to get past this bullshit that we've all been trained with, because if we don't, it's going to kill us. It's going to kill us, and it is killing us. So men who feel isolated typically feel isolated because they don't know how to emotionally express themselves and to share their feelings with other men, with other brothers. And because of that, that loneliness is a major contributing factor to so many diseases and physical problems, heart attack, and on down the list, including, of course, suicide. So EQ, emotional intelligence, is really valuable. And more than that, I would say that, we can actually learn to understand that our emotions are actually things that we can get behind and ride energetically. That if I'm feeling anger, great. All I need to do is be on top of it, have it in front of me, and say, yeah, I'm angry right now. Because one of the close friends of anger is passion, right? And most of us as men already hopefully understand what it is that we're really passionate about. And if you don't know that, all you got to do is follow the trail of anger. What pisses you off? And if you can sit down and figure that out, you'll pretty much be right on to what you're passionate about. So EQ is important. I'd say a third factor is purpose. One of the things that I think distinguishes men from women, and I'm going to make a broad generalization here, is that men, women, okay, historically, they're the mothers, they're more the ones who are in charge of child rearing and the like. So in a sense, at least historically, genetically, they have a sort of innate purpose. And I understand we're in different times now, and I'm not trying to get women to stay in the home and be mothers and housekeepers. I have no interest in that. But I'm just making a broad generalization here. And I think men need a sense of purpose. They need to have that sense of mission, something that is greater than themselves that they're living for. And that to me is really fundamental, that we understand how we're part of a greater picture. And that picture can be human life as a whole, or it can be smaller, something that we're part of a team, whether it's, of course, a sports team is logical, or a work team, or whatever, but it has to be something grand. And I always say to people that if your mission is something you can accomplish in your life, it's not big enough. It's got to be grander than who we are. And I'll tell you what really inspires me is thinking about the cathedral builders of Central Europe. These buildings took 300-400 years to build. And you'd get some craftsman in, say, 1550 who's working on the door of Chartres Cathedral, right? And that's what he's going to dedicate his life to, making the most fucking beautiful door he could possibly make. And he's never going to see the building that's completed 200 years after he dies. But that's okay, because he made his powerful contribution. So a fourth factor to me that's really important is shadow. We really have to understand as men, what is our darkness? What is the stuff that we typically hide, repress, and deny, and do not want to share with people? We do not, in effect, want to even own it to ourselves. But these are fundamental parts of who we are as men. And the fact is, until we can own them and recognize them and name them and keep them in front of us, they're going to constantly come from behind and kick us in the ass, and not only contribute to our self-destruction, but contribute to the destruction of our relationships with all of our loved ones and everybody else. So it's really important. And the term shadow, of course, comes from Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud's student and the psychologist, about our own darkness. I mean, another way of looking at this issue is, I think that every man has a killer in him. And I think that that's actually a pretty good thing, because it's important to know that if and when we need to, we can access that killer in extreme circumstances to protect and defend the people that we love and the communities that we love. That's really important. So, but if that killer is in shadow And in darkness, there's all kinds of shit that can come down, right? From that side of ourselves misbehaving too. So, and then, the fifth part for me is really about community. How do we learn to live as men in community where we don't distrust and mistrust each other, which frankly is what, capitalism teaches us. Every man is competing with every other man for scarce resources, whether it's women or money or jobs, so we have to get over that bullshit and understand that we as men do not thrive unless we are living and functioning in loving community. So we have to find and seek brothers who basically can support us in living our mission and support us in being our best selves. Partly because of shadow, right? It's our own darkness that we can't always see very clearly ourselves. We rely on those brothers to say, Frederick, look, you're doing this. This is not the man I know you want to be. So how about reconciling this with that man? So they call us to account. They can remind us of our greatness and call us to our best selves. So for me, those are the 5 key principles.
That was amazing. I agree with all of it. So tell me about ritual. How does ritual play into male development?
Well, I think it plays into human development. So I don't know that, men require it any more than, say, women do. But I think all of us as human beings need to basically resurrect and implement rituals of healing and transformation into our everyday lives. And not coincidentally, that's the subtitle of my second book, which is called Rights to a Good Life, RITES. And the subtitle is Everyday Rituals of Healing and Transformation. So what we need to do is not reinvent the wheel by any means. But when it comes to, let's say, our son's birthday or our daughter's graduation or a homecoming, a welcoming home ceremony for a veteran, let's say, or a housewarming party, we need to seize those opportunities to deepen the experience by recognizing where we're positioned in a person's given human lifespan. So when it comes to, let's say, a 15-year-old boy and it's his birthday, we want to call out and recognize that he's in the midst of this adolescence, which is a hell of a difficult transition into mature masculinity, into young adulthood. And so he's got all these hormones boiling through his body and coming out of his ears. And we want to call out and name and recognize some of those steps. Maybe they're baby steps, but they're nonetheless positive steps that he's taking towards realizing his ideal of masculinity, which is what every boy wants. Every adolescent certainly wants. So we need to just have a little ritual or, whatever circumstances require to say, time out. Let's recognize what's happening here. Bobby's turning 15. He's becoming the man he's always wanted to be. I see him showing up on time for meetings. I see him doing what his mother asks. He's taking out the garbage every week. I see him tutoring his little sister in, math, helping her with that, whatever it is, name it, because adolescents have bullshit meters off the wazoo. And if it's not real, if it's not sincere, they'll know it in half a second. So it's got to be real. So anyway, those are just some rudimentary examples, but we can do it throughout our lives.
So I was reading one of your articles and I was really fascinated by it, where you were talking about mass shooters who are, 90% adolescent boys, or 18 to 24, I guess, and actually white. And you were talking about how that in a sense, the transition from boyhood to manhood was a death, and that was playing a role in these boys who are so disillusioned that they go so far as to kill others and then kill themselves.
It's a symbolic death, okay? So basically the rite of passage that's required in order to transition an adolescent into young adulthood is a symbolic dying to the adolescent self, the ego, which is all about me, in order to be reborn into the young adult self, which is about maturity. It's about us, okay? So what's interesting is that we don't have these cultural, these broad, dominant culture-wide ceremonies, rituals of transition now, these rites of passage. So what happens? Well, we get teenage boys who unconsciously try to enact some kind of ritual of passage into young adulthood, where they can prove themselves and to the world that they are in fact men and worthy to be called men. And I believe that this is something that's genetically encoded in our human genes, you know, that come adolescence, especially boys, really need this. And so we as parents and as elders and as community members and neighbors need to recognize the signs. And so when Bobby's acting out and, you know, he's now getting into alcohol for the first time, or he's experimenting with sex or drugs or driving too fast down city streets, whatever it may be, we need to recognize that as a sign. It's a sign where he's letting us know it's his time. He needs to be initiated. The community of elders needs to show up and say, Bobby, you're coming with us, and you take him out to the woods or the desert or wherever, and we're going to teach you about what it means to be a man. We're going to teach you the rights and responsibilities of manhood. So we don't do that anymore. And so guess what? The most severely dysfunctional representation of that is mass shooting. So you get boys picking up guns who are imitating what they see on TV or in movies, that this is a heroic thing to do. And yes, it's an important part of any initiation ritual. You have to face your own death. And it doesn't have to necessarily be a literal death, but it has to at least be the fear of death, or if you will, become a metaphoric death. So these mass shooters, they face their own death and often die in enacting this ritual of proving themselves as men. However dysfunctional and fucked up that is, that's what at some level I believe they're actually trying to do.
Yeah. So let's kind of move back to the macro issues. So I mean, we talk about it a lot here. I read about it a lot. I mean, just give me kind of what you see as what's going on with men right now.
Well, it depends on what age we're talking about. Do you have a particular age you focus on?
Well, we're all everyone here is, I think, kind of middle to later middle. So guys, how about guys our age?
Okay. Well, so the greatest numbers of suicide right now are men of a certain age, 65 and older, just behind the numbers of adolescents, and who are primarily adolescent males. So that's a huge red flag. Something is wrong. And what's wrong is that men have either never had or lost that sense of purpose that I was talking about a minute ago, where they no longer have that function for the family, for example, of being the breadwinner, right? We're in a post-industrial, post-capitalist society where men are no longer rewarded with jobs that actually can feed families. So that's a problem. And huge numbers of men are unemployed. And if there's, a straight shot to hell, I think for a man, it's typically being unemployed, because he loses that sense of purpose and he gets into a dark spiral of self-shame of like, I'm no good, I can't be good for anybody else, and that can lead to suicide. So that's an important thing to recognize, that we're in this huge macro transition where the whole planet is going through a transition that we as men are, in a sense, caught up in. We're not, well, that's another pernicious lie, right? That society teaches us. It's all on us as an individual. If I'm failing, it's because of me, Frederick Marx, doing something wrong, and I'm a failure. And that is a dangerous, pernicious lie that most of us have been sold since we're children. So these are macro trends that we have to recognize. We are not alone. And that's the quickest way out of that maelstrom of spinning down the darkness, is finding people to get together and sit in circle with, like you guys do in these meetings, and go, you know what? You're speaking my truth, I'm speaking your truth, and we are not alone. We are brothers in this together. That's essential.
So let's go back to the boys. What do we do? I mean, I spent a lot of time trying to think about young men, and I've spent a lot of time talking to principals, talking to coaches, starting to talk to young men, and they not school shootings are obviously the most extreme, but in terms of the data, obviously, they're far behind academically. They seem to be disengaged, and it is where suicide, opioid deaths, it's just a world of hurt. And if you go down the socioeconomic levels, it gets worse. If you go to people of color, it gets worse. And so, what is your view of how we even make a dent in that problem?
Well, yeah, I'm kind of a broken record. I mean, I always come back to initiation and mentorship. I mean, to me, they're two halves of one whole, and they are required for every human being, for every one of our different rites of passage in a given lifetime. So, from birth into toddlerhood into puberty, puberty into adolescence, adolescence into young adulthood into middle age into eldership, and eldership into death. Ideally, we are supported by mentors and community members through all of those transitions, again, to help us to symbolically die, or just, more prosaically, to let go of the identities that we've had for that segment of our lives and to welcome in a new one. Now, it is really disturbing to think about how boys will soon be 1 in 3 college students, that girls will outnumber boys 2 to 1 as college students. And, a lot of that has to do with sort of the fact that our changing notions of masculinity have not caught up in popular culture. And so men and boys are still clinging, well, to some degree, to outmoded pictures, but they know that they're not right, they're not dysfunctional. I mean, they are dysfunctional, and that they're supposed to be feeling, caring human beings, but they don't know how to fit this into a picture of sort of working, proud masculinity. So we as elders have failed them to a large degree, because we haven't stood up and said, follow me, follow my example. I'll show you how you can still be a fierce warrior and still be a loving, caring, emotional father. Though that balancing of all of those different, let's call them archetypal quadrants of energies, are something that is just off the radar of most males in our society. So that's what we need to sort of do for young men, is model that, mentor them, and do everything we can to get them initiated so that they can, again, grow into their next phase of life.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm actually I'm giving a talk this coming week at a business, an MBA class, and the professor called me and he's like, and I was saying, like, my deal is mental health, addiction, and manhood. And he's like, well, my class in business school is 3/4 women, so you better like think about that, which is crazy. He's like, 10 years ago it was all guys,
Yep.
literally.
Yep.
Anyways, we had a speaker on, I don't know, it was last week, week before. It was a friend of mine who's he's the head of school of a K-12 school in Roxbury, which is the poorest and of color neighborhood of Boston, right? And so, like, he has data about how many of those kids just don't have men in their lives. So, like, in that situation, I get what you're saying, but I don't even really know how practically to deal with it. Like, there aren't men in that community who are available to mentor and provide ritual for those kids.
Well, and you don't have to look outside your everyday life, because all of us, to some degree, comes into contact with younger people. And, we can let them know, well, besides simply modeling what it is that they're so hungry for to see, which is what I was saying a moment ago about this rounded expression of masculinity, but we can also make ourselves available to them and just say, look, I remember what it was like for me as an adolescent. I was confused as hell. I was acting out with drugs and alcohol and all these ways that I did not have any clue what I was doing. Fortunately, I didn't hurt anyone, myself or others, but I came awfully close. So I'm here for you. And I want you to know that should you ever want just somebody who can listen, not here to tell you anything. I'm here to listen to you and reflect back to you what it is I'm hearing. And I'm not judgmental. I'm all ears. So here's my number. Call me anytime. That, to me, start with what's practical. You don't have to like quit your job and then I'm moving to Roxbury and I'm going to mentor men. In fact, it's much better anyway if those men have men of color who are going to step up and be the role models and not men from outside their community.
Yeah. So I'll ask one last question and we'll go around the horn here. So, one of the things that that I find the most challenging, and I guess I just like your thoughts on it, is the narrative. When I think about those boys and like those boys who are shooting up schools or whatever, I think about the narrative of how there's a very negative narrative about masculinity that's kind of very prevalent. And so everything I'm trying to do is create an alternative which is positive and still masculine. But it seems like, a drop in the bucket. So, like, how can we change the narrative?
Well, in a sense, that's been my life's work, Tom. I'm doing what I can. I mean, I write books about it. I publish blogs. I give talks. I've made films. In fact, speaking of films, I would love to share with y'all one 7-minute film called Boys Become Men, which illustrates some of these principles, I think.
Sure.
So should we do that now? You want to do that?
Yeah, let's do that now, and then I'll stop the recording, and then we'll allow people to give feedback.
Great. Can you give me share screen capability?
Yeah, hold on a second. Let me make you a co-host. All right. There you go. You should be able to do it now.
Great. Okay, share sound, optimize for video. And this should do it.
Cool.
So let me just get this on screen here. Can you all see this?
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Go for
All
it.
right, here we go. If I can just find the start button.
It's over to the left.
No, I know it's covered up by the Zoom window. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Holla! And the doctor said, you have a son. What does it take to go from a boy to a man? Trying to figure it out has been tripping me out.
I'd like to find that long-lost map. That map that should have been, when I hit puberty, they should have handed to me. Since the first day, I've been looking for that map. That long-lost. Here's your boyhood map. I'm hoping that I can find someone who can help me and send me in the right direction.
When a culture doesn't provide formal rites of passage or initiations, people find their own, or they don't find them and never really find the traction of their life.
I wish that, I'd grown up with a male in the house other than myself. Someone to even out the numbers, someone to be a man, be a guy. So we can hang out and do guy stuff. So they can hang out and do girl stuff. That's what I wish.
One of the functions of initiation is to bring the young people fully into the community. And there, of course, is a longing for that. And it's in all the young people I see. It's in the colleges, but it's also in the street gangs.
There's nothing more satisfying than just knocking the crap out of some guy and looking down at him and just like, I did that. It made me forget about all those,
Please
bad times.
mute yourself.
I was ready to get him out of the house. He had run away from home. Some of the things my son has done would warrant him getting kicked out in some households.
I guess I just kind of pushed it back to the back of my mind because I'm starting to feel it again, like a resounding disappointment in myself.
This opportunity to do the Boys to Men came up, and it's my last hope. And if it doesn't work for me, then the next step is Jeremy going with his dad.
Start to think about what your mission is, what you want to do.
This is the time where, Jeremy, you decide, what kind of father do I want to be? What kind of grandfather do I want to be? And you have an opportunity. The world is open to you. We're proud of you. You're a real leader. I want to thank you for letting me be your grandpa.
See that? See that come down there. That's the kind of leader men want to follow. They'd have their little boy. So proud of you.
You're a great young man. I'm so proud of you. You walked into some leadership this weekend too, man. You feel it? Yeah.
A lot of people go through a lifetime and never have anybody say, hey, I love you. And I want to say to you, big man, I love you. I love you for what you are.
I love those guys.
I've been searching for help for some time because it's been quite a struggle. And when he came back, my son openly communicated with me his feelings, which is the first time he's ever done that. And I have to thank you for trying and for honoring me by trying. And you are the best. I love you.
My brother, he talks a lot. It's as if he had two mouths and one ear.
Jay's biggest challenge is patience. He needs more patience with himself and with his brother.
She knows all these can you, like, stop?
Pressure on you and high expectations because you're perfect just the way you are. You are absolutely perfect just the way you are, Jay. An angel. An angel from God. Thank you for being you, and thank you for being my son.
Love you, Dad.
I love you, Jay. I love you. Always. I tend to be a dictator at home and pushing him in directions that I feel he should be going. We just shared tears together for a half hour on that rock, telling each other we love each other, and that's a bond that'll never be broken.
Well, I see you give more than I can take. Well, I only harvest some. As the days fly past, will we lose our grasp or fuse it in the sun?
Anybody that's doing anything that recognizes and blesses the unique inherent qualities of young people probably is doing some good, you know, because the general cultural atmosphere is to deny that, and that creates an unnecessary wound in young people. Young people don't feel welcome.
Dream up, let me fill your cup with the promise of a man.
Awesome. That's great. So I think we'll stop the recording here and we'll have a discussion. But thank you so much for sharing the film and for the discussion so far, Frederick, being here.
Hey, one quick question, Frederick, that was outstanding. Tom, just